to me is the essence of the gospel. And I did not want to bypass it to go to the next one. And we were already one behind. So maybe, hopefully, I'll be able to say some things during the lesson that you'll understand why I didn't jump ahead to the next lesson. I think, huh? The Lord of the dispossessed. Let's bow and pray. Would you pray for us? You know, I already got Terry and Bob to be thinking about the introduction to this lesson. And I'm going to ask for 5 examples of a time in your life, 5 different people, a time in your life where you were in a setting that made you uncomfortable. So, you're first. Yeah. No, I don't care. Tell about when you came here. Yeah.
When I was going to, where did we go? Evangelical Covenant. That was Bob's church, basically. And I don't know, we were going there about 10 years, and I probably wasn't comfortable there until about the 8th year. Like, and we've been coming here, I'm not sure how long, 2 or 3 years, 3 years, I don't know. And I was comfortable right away because I knew a few people already. And now he's at the point where he's comfortable, and I think I was saying that he was too comfortable because he speaks up and about me.
Hey, that's good. You know, there's nothing better than the practical of life. So that's 1. 5 people share a place. Doesn't have to be this church, doesn't have to be.
When I was first elected to be on the board of trustees at Olivet, I went for the meeting, and I read the schedule, and I went into a meeting that I wasn't supposed to be at. And it didn't take long to find out, so I turned around real quick and went out, and I thought, why are you on this board? I just felt very uncomfortable.
Now it's 30 years later.
And a little bit, but not as bad.
Okay.
Mine was, I was put on the committee for the new hymnal. And the hymnal that's now 20-some years old was Sing to the Lord. And I had to go to Kansas City several times for meetings, and it was all men and me. And meetings for choosing the songs that would go in the hymnal and what keys they were going to be in. And I didn't even want to say a word. I was petrified. I really felt. I never did feel comfortable through all those meetings. And one evening, I left O'Hare, or left Midway, I guess, to go to Kansas City, and something fell off our plane. The plane had to turn around and come back. And so I got out of the plane and I went home. I said, there's no way I'm going to even, I skipped that meeting. I said, I don't really want to be there because I was nervous. But yeah, that was uncomfortable.
So do you understand we're in the midst of celebrities? Can you imagine that? We have somebody that was on the hymnal, and we have somebody that has been on the Olivet board for 30 plus years. We are in select company.
We are.
I'm joking, but do you understand what we're saying? That there are times in our lives when we can be very uncomfortable. And I remember when Carol and I left Portage First and we went to South Lake. And we're Nazarenes all of our lives. And we still, when we walked in there, we didn't know that many people. But I'll never forget Anna Mae Tackett. made us feel like we were family from day one. Now here's what I'm saying. When we have people come through our doors, try everything in our power to make them feel like they're family. It doesn't mean that they're dispossessed. It just means that they're in a new surrounding. Does that make sense?
Yes.
We can do the kingdom a great service or disservice by how we accept people. How many? We had 3 examples. I gave one. Anybody else? I need 5. Go ahead, Linda.
Well, I'm not making disparaging remarks about Southwood, but I never felt like I belonged there.
Really?
I'm too dumb to figure it out. I mean, I was in the choir and I was teaching Sunday school, but it just never felt like I belonged there. And so probably a church should not do this. They sent out a little questionnaire. Like if you had a problem and you needed to talk to someone, would you feel comfortable talking to anybody in this congregation, asking them to go out and have a cup of coffee with you so you could talk? And I thought to myself, no, I don't. And so that was the beginning of the end when I decided I had to leave that church. I'd been there for several years at that point. And so when I came here, and I have never felt that way here. This
Well,
church is a lot more.
that's a plus for us. I'll guarantee you though, there are people that have visited us that don't feel like that. I'm not ripping on us. I'm just saying that I just want us to be the very best that we can be. And this lesson really drives home the point. And I'm going to ask Tim now to read just a few verses before the beginning of today's lesson. And then I'll have him just read that first part and then continue on with verses 24 through 30 of Mark's Gospel. Okay?
Beginning at verse 14 in Mark 7. Again, Jesus called the crowd to him and said, "Listen to me, everyone, and understand this. Nothing outside a person can defile them by going into them. Rather, it is what comes out of a person that defiles them." And after he had left the crowd and entered the house, his disciples asked him about this parable. "Are you so dull?" he asked. "Don't you see that nothing that enters a person from the outside can defile them? For it doesn't get into their heart, but into their stomach, and then out of the body." In saying this, Jesus declared all foods clean. He went on, "What comes out of a person is what defiles them. For it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come: sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All these evils come from inside and defile a person."
Okay, let's just take a moment there. This is what happened right prior to today's lesson. And here is Jesus was talking to the Pharisees, and he was trying to get them to understand what was important from his Father's perspective. Because the Jewish people, God had pronounced that they were his people, that he was going to use them to communicate to the rest of the world. And in that process, they had taken the position that they were supposed to be separate. They were so special that everybody else was unclean. they were to be shunned. And so, he was trying to get his father sent him here so that everybody here on earth could understand how God thinks. Not that we can fully understand, but we have to understand from Jesus and from God's perspective how we're to live here on earth. So that's the setting that Jesus just left to go to the setting that happens today. And I find it kind of I'm of the opinion that God and Jesus are sovereign over everything. He wants to communicate to me, he's going to doesn't matter what it takes, he's going to get my attention. He does not leave things in my life to happenstance. Dick lives over there on Glen Rose. I'm going to bother him for 6 months. No. He's going to bother me every day until I see through his son's eyes. And so he goes from that setting to the setting today, and let's jump in there. Tim, you want to read that? It's 24 through 30.
Jesus left that place and went to the vicinity of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, yet he could not keep his presence secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, born in Syrian Phoenicia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. First, let the children eat all they want, he told her, for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Lord, she replied, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. And then he told her, for such a reply you may go. The demon has left your daughter. She went home and found her child lying on the bed and the demon gone.
How many things can you think about that would say that Jesus was dealing with a situation that was, to the Jewish leaders, was just a place you don't go and people you don't talk to and things that you just shouldn't be associated with? Let's list. There's 3. Let's list them. What first comes to your mind?
Woman at the well.
What's that?
Woman at the well. Shouldn't be talking to a Samaritan woman at a well.
Now so this story is not the woman at the well, but it is a woman. Here's men. Women are somewhere under this table. They're just not on the same part. What else about this story did the Jewish leaders say that Jesus was all messed up? Anybody else?
He's from the wrong place.
The wrong place.
Wrong nationality.
Wrong nationality. What else?
Came and talked to a man.
What?
She came and talked to a man.
Yeah. Okay. The other thing that, in addition to what Pastor said and what we've talked about, is the fact that she had a daughter living in her house that was unclean. Think about it. Now, how in the world did Jesus go from talking to the Pharisees about how his father thought? What better, and I don't think there's anything that is of accidental nature with regard to Jesus. I think so that the people that he rubbed shoulders with could actually see a real life example of what he had just taught about. He went to the wrong place. He talked to a woman, and he got involved with the healing child. So, you know, in the Bible, I don't know about you. I don't know anybody demon possessed. Do you? Huh?
Probably, but we just don't know who they are.
What?
Probably, but we just don't know it.
Uh-huh.
We just chalk it up to that they're sinful, but there are some awful people in this world that they could very well be demon possessed.
Maybe that is a lesson for us. When you see evil behavior and you see things that are off the charts as far as the way you think and live, maybe they're demon possessed. You know, Jesus made a comment, I think it's in Matthew. He said, you're either for me or you're against me. You can't ride the fence in the middle. Now, if you are for him, you have Jesus in your heart, right? If you're not for him, guess who controls your life? Satan.
Right.
So, I am going to read something here that, well, I'm going to ask two questions first. So we've already talked about the wrong place, that's the Gentile region, and the wrong people, and a daughter that's totally sick. And then it's kind of interesting to me, of what Tim read, is that it's almost as though Jesus is demeaning to the woman, right? Said, the children have got to eat. And the children, you know who the children are? The Israel, okay. And who are the dogs? Huh?
Anybody who's not an Israelite.
Yeah. Now, I never have, I've been very reluctant. The church is very good to buy this Illustrated Bible Life. For whatever reason, this week I pick it up and say, you know, I'm going to try to include some of these things in the lesson. And here's some of the things I found with regard to make sure I'm reading from the right place too. Okay. The writer of this, and he's got to be this guy has got to be from a Muslim country by this name. Listen to this name. Jair Tashjian. It's got to be and he's writing this. So I would imagine maybe he was chosen to comment on this because he knew firsthand how people feel in those settings. Here's what he says. A desperate woman came beseeching Jesus to heal her demon-possessed daughter. Mark clearly indicates that she was of Gentile origin, describing her as a Greek, born in Syrian Phoenicia. The fact that she was a woman and a Gentile at that, and representing a home where there was an unclean spirit in a young girl, is an extreme case of what constituted uncleanness in the minds of Jesus' contemporaries. Do you understand why the Pharisees just could not stand him? Everything that they thought was reality, he was upsetting. Amazing. Let me continue on. But just prior to this, he had had a discussion and a teaching moment with the Pharisees, and he said, here's what it was about. Uncleanness is not about outward matters, such as social contacts, purity laws, or ritual procedures. It's what's inside a person that makes one unclean. The Pharisees, in fact, were unclean because they would not take to heart what their Heavenly Father said was reality. Think about it. So then Jesus, he goes on to say this. The initial response of Jesus to the woman comes across as offensive and demeaning to her. When you have read this in the past, did you ever just say, well, what in the world? What kind of person is this person I'm serving? He's ripping on this woman. He's calling her everything but good. You ever thought about that? I mean, I don't know about you. I have. But then he kind of tempers it. And then this guy, he says some things that are pretty interesting. Here's what he says. He said this has been a debate on the part of scholars for hundreds of years. And he says here's some of the thinking that goes beyond, or goes into what some of them think. He said, first of all, that the word for dogs here is like a small dog, one that's under the table. Nothing wrong with a little small dog, right? It's when you get a big Mastiff or you get a big German Shepherd. That's really a dog. This was like just a little dog that they're eating the scraps under the table. That's one thought, that what he was saying about the dogs was not that bad. Okay, here's another thought. I love this one. Others have suggested that Jesus may have been using certain facial expressions, such as a twinkle in the eye or a smile, to make a tongue-in-cheek sort of statement. I've read my Bible forever. I never have thought about it in that terms. But what if he is given this lesson to the Pharisees, and now he has a first-hand experience, and he's dealing with this woman, and he's smiling and kind of making it a humorous thing. I kind of like that. Isn't that kind of neat? Here he's getting a truth across in a very unoffensive way. Now that's the kind of Jesus I think that's the kind I serve. He's not like me. He doesn't go out of his way to make people feel bad.
That's right, yes.
My wife said to me yesterday, this is classic me. And I'm laughing, but I'm telling you, this is not good. That makes sense? I get calls all the time about people wanting to sell stuff. And one of them that I get is they want to loan me money. And very, very early on in the conversation, I'll say, how much do you want to borrow? Hoping that they would get off the phone. And my wife says, why do you pick up the phone? You know what it's, if it's an 800 or an 855 or any of those things, don't pick it up. It's just, amen. Okay, so, back to my Jesus. I don't think he would go about life doing those things. Does that make sense? What?
I'm just going to comment.
Okay, good.
One, it's like you might be tweaking the Pharisees, going, well, they're not paying any attention to me, and, you are, so you might be tweaking them, but the other thing is, you might be asking this Gentile woman, do you have enough faith? And she's not just going to be turned down, like, well, hey, even I get some scraps, I'll take whatever I can get.
Yeah.
It might be just well, where's your faith? Do you have enough faith? Ask me for more. And just, she says, yes, I'll take it.
Yeah.
It might be just a little bit of that reflecting to the Pharisees what their attitude is, and but going past that, like kind of in their face type of thing, granting
the best learning experience is if you can see practical example of what is being taught. I think this is a practical example of what Jesus had been talking to the Pharisees about. Interesting thing, even his disciples, what did he say to them? Why are you so dull? How many times did he say to them, why are you so dull? Many times. Does he ever say to us, why are you so dull on what is kingdom business? I don't say that to make you feel bad. I say it to say, hey, maybe we need to wake up, and maybe we need to, so to speak, smell the roses and find out what the Scripture says, and then live it out. That's the bottom line. Let's see if there's one more thing. Here's what he says too, and I won't read the whole thing, but he said just prior to this, Jesus had fed the 5,000. And the 5,000, there might have been some Jewish people in there, but it was basically a Gentile crowd. And because of what Jesus feeding the 5,000 and saying meet their needs, and that's why we're here, the church, the early church took those examples of Jesus living out life to create their manual for how they operated. You know, our church, I don't know an awful lot about our church in the very beginning, and Pastor has occasionally told us about it, but we had pretty interesting beginning. We're not this upper crust elite outfit, you know that? We were founded in the we really were, weren't we? Huh? And what our Phineas Brzee? I mean, he was not afraid to go to where the people were down in the gutter. If you now another name that comes to my mind, Uncle Buddy Rob, drunk. And Jesus came and saved him. He was a cowboy. I mean, he probably didn't take a bath for 2-3 weeks at a time. I mean, he was like the dregs of the earth, right? Did you know this when then Jesus came into his life and he became a preacher? Did you know that he personally paid for 600 young men to become preachers? Can you think? Now, here's what he was. He's a drunk and dirty and fighting and everything else. Jesus comes in and then he preaches and he pays for 600 young men to become pastors or preachers. Is that incredible? Is it amazing what Jesus can do in your life when you get on the same page? And you know what's hard for me? What's hard for me is to get on the same page as Jesus is on. Now, I told Carol I was going to use this, and it's like I'm just preaching this morning, right? I mean, I'm supposed to be teaching. But in my life, I have had unbelievable experiences that I think helped me to understand that this lesson on the dispossessed people, it really rings true to me. And I'll give you some examples. I've been on the mission field. I've seen people live way below what we live. Pastor, I was going to ask you this. When you went to Argentina and you went, were your eyes open just incredibly? What did it do for you?
Just reminded me that I've gotten a lot better than I act like I do at home.
Anybody else been on work and witness trips or anything like that?
I went to Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah.
And, we were helping with, we was at the college there, I believe it was, and, doing stuff. And that was my first time to ever be on the mission trip. And the their work ethic, even though they were struggling financially, you know, and you could say, well, they're just gonna do a halfway job because they're not getting paid that much. They put their all into it, and they had such faith. And um, I just remember feeling so inadequate and ungrateful for what I had. And when you see people that they have nothing, but because of Jesus, they have everything, and it comes across in their life.
Stuart crawled out of his chair over there because he's. How many times have you been on the? 4 times. What did it do for you?
What's that?
What did it do for you?
Being appreciative of what I have, recognizing, I mean, what Kim said, that the spirit of worship, the joy of the service, enjoyment of service that they have, how little they had, kind of puts it to shame that we would. That we're so caught up in our own creature comforts that we don't appreciate what God has actually given us.
I see Jason nodding his head as well.
So, our last trip that we went on, Stuart and I were both in the same spot, and we expected to create a pastor's dwelling within the church. When we got there, we found out that the pastor had a vision for the future of the church, and that we were going to be digging holes, basically 2 meters deep by 1 meter squared, in clay and volcanic rock. And that experience, seeing the people join together to be able to do the work, was just amazing. And also to see what can happen whenever, you know, I'm one person. I can't do much by myself. 2 of us can do a little bit more, you know. But we took 40 teenagers into that thing, and we ended up putting in 9 holes in the ground and foundational structures for that church for the future of that Guatemalan village. That changed me so much to just go, you know what? We couldn't speak to each other very well, but we could communicate with each other, and we could work together for God's kingdom and for the future. That's eventually going to be a worship center and a medical center for the community. And to be able to see what God can do with the little bit that we can give is just amazing.
I have 2 other experiences, and I hope that you hear my heart. I want you to hear that I don't feel like I'm special or anything like that, but I do want you to hear something that has made me take stock of myself. One of the occasions when we went to Brazil, Donna was with us. And, you know, when I go on work and witness, I'm all about brick and mortar. We got a job to do. I am here. Let's get this thing built. Now, occasionally, there'll be a tug at my heart to be interactive with the people. But as we were leaving Brazil on that trip, and Donna was off in the, I'm ready to go home. The mission accomplished. Donna's over here sobbing her eyes out. Now, we're like 2nd, 3rd cousins or whatever. I walked over to her and I said, "What is wrong with you? We came here and and she sobbed and said, these people have so tugged at my heart. I don't want to leave. Now, she had identified to the point where I believe that that's where Jesus wants us to get in our ministry. The other time, well, I have two other things. I'm sharing these, and I'm just stealing all of the time, but I hope you hear what I'm saying. I've been on 4 or 5 work and witness trips, and I went on one work and witness trip that I, to this day, cannot get over. I went to the Indian reservation in America. Have you ever, oh. This has got to be the most troubling, the most despair that I've ever encountered going on a work and witness trip. The Indian people, even though they have the truth of the gospel, they still will hold on with this hand to all of the witchcraft and Indian lore and everything else that goes along with it, even though they have Jesus in this hand. And for me, when I went on that trip out there, I came home, I was despondent because the young people that are living on the reservations, they're just drunks. And they have no hope because they don't take what is offered to them in the way of hope. And our government is, I'm not even going there, but somehow or other, they are a lost people. And I came home and I basically said to myself, Lord, there isn't anything mankind can do for those people if you don't change their heart. There is no hope for the Indian people living on these reservations. It is beyond comprehension. Now I have one more good story. How many of you have ever taught in a prison? Everybody say, have you? Yeah. I had the privilege of teaching in Westville for 2 years, every Monday night. When I would go there, it was kind of, I'd get to teach the lesson just like I'm teaching now, and it was good. And so when I would go home at night, I'd feel pretty good. And over the course of time, I met a couple that were just so sweet. It was a big black man who was probably 6'8", and his wife. And she's on the order of Aunt Jemima, just pleasant as all get out. So one day I got up the courage to ask, because I had found out that he had been in prison in one of the worst. There's 2 really bad prisons in Illinois, Joliet and Marion. And he had been in prison in Joliet. And so I was asking, well, what in the world, why was he in prison? Because now he's out and he comes every Monday night. And he just has a way of relating to everybody that we're teaching, just incredible. And so I asked, and they said, well, he was in prison for killing somebody. There is no way this guy killed anybody. Then they said, oh yeah. And then when he's in prison, he killed another person. 2 persons he killed. And now he's out on the street and he's being used by God. And I'm saying, oh my word, isn't it incredible? Would you say that guy was dispossessed? He was the dregs of society. He was a murderer. And I don't know if I've ever met anybody that had a kinder, gentler spirit than him. Just beyond comprehension. Then I find out more about him. This is how God works in the life of the dispossessed. So he has killed 2 people, and then he gets saved. And you know how people, have you ever heard somebody say, well, the Lord talked to me? Have you ever, and you kind of like, what in the world? And he said that the Lord, he told the people, the Lord said, I am getting out of here in 2 months. And they said, you are crazy. You've killed 2 people. There is no way. And he said, the Lord told me, I'm getting out. 2 months later, he's out. And then, when he goes back to South Bend, there's no jobs. It's one of those times when the economy just really, and it was a time when, if you know anything about South Bend, they had a Studebaker factory there. It had a lot of good jobs. They shut the Studebaker factory down, and the town was really just in the pits. And so he went back, and friends of his would say, you'll never get a job. And he said, the Lord told me I'm getting a job. And I'm getting it next week. Next week came, he has a job. Can you imagine how he could brag on God? He is the dregs of society. Jesus comes into his life and turns his life upside down. So he made a promise to the Lord. As long as I'm alive, I am going to go and minister in the prisons. Isn't it just like God to take the very worst of society and turn them into his work? Isn't that incredible? I believe with all my heart this woman that had the child that needed, I'll guarantee you, she's one of the best disciples. 3 minutes. We haven't even gotten to the second story. So anyway, where am I?
3 minutes.
No. Where was I? Huh? I would say that woman became one of the best witnesses or disciples that Jesus ever touched.
Yes.
Would you say that?
Yes.
And then later on in this scripture, we're not even going to get there, but Jesus made us comment, don't tell anybody. If Jesus did things like that in your life, would you want to tell somebody? Or would you want to go home and crawl in your house and never say one word about it? Now there were 3. Okay, this is the last thing I'm going to say. When Jesus told the people that he changed their life, the second one was the guy couldn't hear and he could speak not very well. Jesus touched his ears, he could heal. He spit on his hand, touched his tongue, and he could speak. And then he tells the guy, he said, don't tell anybody. Now, is that a strange thing to say? Do you have any idea why Jesus said don't tell anybody? Yeah? Is that strange?
Yeah.
Here are 3 possible explanations. Number 1, if Jesus came to earth and he fed the 5,000 and he healed the blind and he healed the brokenhearted. You remember one time when he said, there's way more to my coming to earth than all the goodies that I do for you? You got to get past all the goodies to see why I really came. Now, why did he come? Did he come only to feed the whatever? Or did he come to die on the cross? So maybe one of the reasons he said to the man, don't tell anybody, is because he didn't want people following him for the wrong reason. He doesn't want us following him for the wrong reason. Why do we follow him? Is it for what we can get, or is it because of who he is? Think about that. Let's bow. Father, thank you for our time together. Thank you for we didn't even get to the second one, but for two stories about how you care about the ones that nobody else cares about. And you want to make a difference in their lives. You want to make a difference. You know, basically, Lord, the way I look at it, when I look around the congregation here, for the most part, people don't have huge problems. But we know some people that need Jesus in a very significant way. Help us to not think about ourselves as much as we try to think about those that do not know you. Thank you for this time together. Thank you for each person here. We just ask that you would bless our efforts in your ministry. I pray in Christ's name.